How do, everyone? This is a total drama what if. It is what if All Stars was written better. So this is entirely subjective, obviously. I'm going to be making various changes to just different aspects of the season to create what I would feel is a better version of Total Drama All Stars while keeping most of the same content all the same. At least the meat of it, not necessarily like the basics. And I have DID, so I actually do have some degree of knowing how to talk about, well, Mike in particular, as well as his headmates. For those who don't know, DID is dissociative identity disorder. Mike calling it multiple personality disorder is actually fine. It's better than it being called split personality. This way, it's a term that other people can just understand in general. So, because of the cartoon logic, he does get some leeway on the DID as well. Like, he is allowed to keep it, no problem. And as a result, we are also keeping Mal in the season. However, now let's get on to things that are actually being more heavily changed. Which, first of all, I'll get to Mal later, don't worry. But first and foremost are the team names. We now have the Heroic Horses and the Villainous Vipers. This is because horses have been associated with gallant steeds that were, very much loved by knights and various other warriors of times long past. And then vipers because, as Chris will put it, all of these guys here are snakes. But as for team composition, what we're keeping are Lindsay, Sierra, Courtney, Zoe, and Cameron on the Heroes team. Meanwhile, Scott, Heather, Duncan, Al, Joe, and Lightning are still on the Villains team. This is going to be a useful slot for two different reasons. So, first and foremost, what's changing about the contestants? Sam is not in the season. Just not in the season. This is taking from suggestions on the subreddit as well, by the way. So as a result, I'm going to be throwing Sam out because a lot of people over on the Total Drama subreddit brought up that Sam was used as a way to replace Owen without actually having Owen, unfortunately. Mm. So I'll be removing Sam for this one. And as a result, Owen does get put onto the heroes team. I'm not fond of Owen, but like I don't hate the guy either. But as a result, another villain that's being added now is Anne Maria, who was also very much brought up and beloved over on the subreddit. I'm personally fond of Brick, and because of his rivalry with Joe, that's why the two are still both here. Because it would be a very excellent way to just give them that conclusion that they never really had. And then we have Gwen, who in this iteration is going to be framed as a hero on a redemption arc by Chris, which puts Mike into the villains team. No, this isn't because of Mal existing yet. This is because, as Chris will put it, who's more two-faced than someone with multiple personalities? Seriously, the actual hate that's aimed at people with DID is very real, and I have been targeted with that ableism. It's not fun. It's not fun at all. Yeah. Episode 1 is going to be a two-parter as well, and there's going to be 14 total season or episodes, not seasons, episodes. So as a result, if you count a two-parter as two episodes, it's 15. But we're starting with episode 1A, which is helping establish various character dynamics. Courtney and Gwen still don't get along. Brick is kind of not super close to anyone, but Lindsay is scared of him. He looks scary, according to her. Sierra still has her weird attachment to Cameron. Zoe is kind of sad that Mike is on the other team, so she's not sure what to do with herself. Owen is getting in the season's quota of fart jokes early because it's Owen. He's still the big eater, like always. Meanwhile, the villains, well, they're villains. Anne Maria is trying to force a switch into Vito from Mike, which give Anne Maria this. She at least acknowledges them as separate people, despite sharing the same body. Lightning is, well, he's being the same as he was in canon. Heather and Al, well, Al isn't actually like out of the drama machine yet, so he's still here. Out of universe, we know that's going to happen, but in universe, he's just sticking around Heather for now. Meanwhile, Scott and Duncan are doing their thing and actually getting along because they're like that. Which, unfortunate. When the teams are formed, what happens is Mike is still fronting. And what happens is when Chris says that line about people being two faced, Courtney over here chimes in saying, "This looks like a real discrimination lawsuit. I helped the autistic kids at my camp when I was a CIT, so I know this is inappropriate." It's Courtney. She's going to look for a way to gloat and look more impressive. And, well, she already knows her lawyers can take total dramas, so there's that as well. Cameron chimes in about it also being not okay. And then Joe, of all people, is upset about it because Mike is too much of a wuss to be on her team. Or too much of a priss, as she would put it. So Mike has them all, like, Mike just tells them all to calm down, which works on these two at the very least. Zoe is offended as well, but when Mike says to calm down, like, everyone, these three kind of just calm down and just listen to him because Mike points out that they're trying to, uh, that Chris in particular is trying to rile them up. And as a result, when they're finally at the cliff to do the challenge, that's when something comes up. Al comes out of the robot, doing his handstand and everything, much to everyone's shock from the first generation cast, as well as Anne Maria, who is instantly into him because it's Anne Maria and she's like that. Now for part 2 of episode 1, where we actually get to the real challenge. The heroes have Owen as their cart pusher, because Cameron points out that because of Owen's mass, it would make everyone else unable to push the cart, and Owen just completely goes with it. Meanwhile, for the villains, Lightning is cart pusher. He's still cart pusher like before. And so what happens is that with the villains, they get it mostly done fine. Vito ends up coming up front at some point during the challenge if he's not there already. Excuse me. Meanwhile, at one point, Lindsay, after making her dive, ends up swimming the wrong way from her team to, and that's the first problem they have in the challenge. It's just Lindsay being Lindsay as she was in All Stars. And then you have Owen. Owen, as the cart pusher, has one major drawback. They're on an island, so they're going to be going back and forth a lot. And Owen sees the berries, and while pushing his team, ends up stopping to eat the berries multiple times. This does not go over well, and it ends up a wash in the Viper's favor. So at elimination, what happens is Lightning is the one sent to exile, like in canon. And at the elimination ceremony, it's talked about how Lindsay actually like screwed things up for everyone because she ended up swimming away. But the bigger deal was Owen and how he ended up causing that problem to go about. So as a result, Owen is voted off, just first eliminated this season. And it's brought up that by the time they get back to the actual like victory shack and everything, Mike is Mike again. And Mike starts to have headaches. So that's a little unfortunate. Mike is having headaches being around all these people. He says it gives him a bad feeling, like he's going to be pushed into something he doesn't like. Now on to episode 2. So it's still the constructing world tours thing again, but in this case it's going to be Big Ben for the villains and the Louvre for the heroes. Mm. The Louvre has extra pieces just because Chris would find it funny. And the traps that were in the original version are still all over the place. Mike is experiencing more headaches. When he has those headaches, his hair flops down for a moment. But ultimately, he keeps stabilizing himself. And the heroes win again. The villains lose because of the same mistake Lightning made in canon. And when exile comes around, Gwen offers herself up to go to exile, just to try making things up with Courtney. That's about like standard fare for them. Episode 3, they're using BB guns instead of leeches because okay, as much as the cartoon logic fits, the leeches were too far. I don't like leeches personally. So as a result, they're using BB guns. And as Chris puts it in the actual episode when they're talking about the challenge, the most bruises loses. And so what happens is different people have their own different things to go off of to try to do. Uh, and Brick ends up actually leading the team in a mostly decent effort, except for Courtney, who drags Cameron along with her separate because she's not into being bossed around like that. Yeah, yeah, it's Courtney. Sierra and Zoe get along just fine with Brick, as does Gwen, who's familiar with this challenge personally. Meanwhile, the villains, they're kind of all doing they're mostly doing a free for all. They are just they are well, these 5 here are having a good time. Anne Maria doesn't care much, but she's totally fine doing it as well, and is unfortunately actually a scary good shot because that's where the gag would work. Mike is reluctant to hurt anyone, especially Zoe. Though at one point, what happens is he does end up getting a hat on his head, bringing Manitoba out, who is actually well adept at this whole thing. And he's not as upset about the matter, which, take that as you will. So what ends up happening is the heroes are going to lose. Because at one point, Courtney is going to actually use Cameron as a human shield when she gets fired at, whether it's by an accidental friendly fire that happens, or it's by, say, I don't know, Heather just having it out for her because Heather would do that and find it funny. That's just what's going to end up happening. Meanwhile, at some point, Manitoba is shooting at Gwen, thinking it's going to be an easy enough shot, only for Duncan to jump in front of it because it's Duncan and he still has a thing for both Gwen and Courtney. In this case, favoring Gwen right now. Granted, he's not doing it correctly, but still. And then we have Lindsay. Lindsay gets startled by Brick and friendly fires on him, causing him to get a lot of bruises, and she ends up friendly firing on a couple of others as well, particularly aiming at Sierra, because she thinks Brick is scary and doesn't remember Sierra being her friend. And then there's Courtney, who's mean enough that Lindsay ends up friendly firing on Courtney as well, without Cameron around this time, because Courtney's mean, and it would make sense if Courtney was the one who was on the villains team as well. This whole debacle with Lindsay causes the heroes to lose entirely. Lindsay ends up getting the boot this time. By the time elimination and exile ceremony are back, Mike is back up front again. And what ends up happening is Mike is the one that's pushed into exile. First is Joe pushing him, telling him he needs to toughen up. Heather then pushes him, calling him a crazy dweeb, because she's not fond of Mike at all, or his DID, unfortunately. And then we have Scott, who just thinks it's funny to push people and be mean to them. And Mike ends up falling into the boat to go to Boney Island. This triggers Mal to reawaken. And that's because Mike's headaches were Mal coming back to the front and awakening again. Because the trigger for Mal is being around a surplus of really bad people. Particularly these two and these two. Granted, this one's a little bit more complicated. Now, another thing that happens is that there's actually a team swap that kicks on. And as a result, Duncan is moved to the heroes team and Courtney is moved to the villains team. Because Courtney did the human shield thing, and then Duncan ended up doing the hero thing of protecting someone he cares about. He's not made insecure by this, but he is definitely confused. And he's not going to focus on retaining his bad boy image, like, by a long shot. So, call that as good or bad as you want. It doesn't really matter. He's just going to end up not trying to retain that bad boy image. He knows he's a softie deep down, and he doesn't like it, but now he's going to be forced to accept it for now. And Duncan, being Duncan, tries to put the moves on Gwen. Sorry, I'm eating. Had to. Episode 4 comes about, and it's still the eating competition. With that, what happens is that Sam is not here to screw it up for the heroes this time. Granted, Owen isn't here to help them out either. But at the very least, things go generally the same with the different characters when they're eating. Courtney gets hit with the green jelly and all that fun stuff. And what ends up happening is the challenge ends up getting botched by Anne Maria. By the time the challenge starts, Mike is already back up front instead of Mal. But Anne Maria botches the challenge entirely because she's so focused on keeping her figure that it ends up causing everyone else to stall. God damn it. Sorry about that. I don't have any video editing skills. Uh, so as a result, what happens is the villains lose, like, not even a total wash, but it is by a decent chunk. And the villains, rightfully angry, vote off Anne Maria, with Brick saying he'll go to Boney Island because Gwen has done enough for the team. And Brick is absolutely assured that he can handle it. What proceeds to happen next in episode 5 is we're still dealing with the moon and the race on Boney Island. What happens there is that the moon still messes with the wildlife, but by the time the challenge is starting, Mal is back up front, and having whistled his tune once or twice between the past couple episodes, which Duncan recognized being nearby, and it caused him to jump. He recognizes it, but he doesn't remember from where. So he is absolutely on edge. When Gwen, of all people, asks him why he's on edge, he just says he thought he heard something that he hasn't heard since juvie. He is trying to play it cool. What proceeds to happen is the race still goes on like normal, and because of the moon being out, what happens is Mike is out front, thankfully. And he got caught up and he's somehow aware of things, thankfully. But yeah, Mike is the one fronting the most right now throughout this episode. And what happens is when the race is still ongoing, the moon ends up getting hidden again, so it's not causing the weird effects, which leads Mal to being up front a decent distance away from the finish line, and suddenly stopping, really confused and really upset why he was suppressed like that. So at the elimination ceremony, what happens is Mike would have been voted out in this situation. But instead, the voting causes him to be sent to the heroes team instead. Which prompts Zoe to be excited and rush up to hug him, propelling Mal back into the headspace and dragging Mike out right away. Which leads to the other 4 headmates surrounding Mal and kind of tying him up so he doesn't force his way back up front. Chester mentioning the only one allowed to mess with that nincompoop's life are us. They're not fond of the maladaptive behaviors. Yes, maladaptive. That's his problem. He's not malevolent, even though he's called the malevolent one. He's actually a maladaptive behavior pattern brought about by the actual issues that have been there. That's why he's so weird. Huh, that's weird. I seem to be missing one. Whatever. But yes, that is the problem with Mal. He is a maladaptive coping mechanism rather than a malevolent, stereotypical evil headmate. Now comes episode 6. This is one of the bigger changes that I have outside of team composition. And in this case, it's a different challenge. Leading up to the actual part of the episode with the challenge, Mike is chatting with Cameron and Zoe about the increase in memory blanks he was having when he was over on the villains team, which, Cameron starts thinking about it and theorizing, as Cameron would do. And the new challenge in this case is a callback to Extreme Torture, but now they're using challenges from Total Drama Action, World Tour, and Revenge of the Island for this one. With the Total Drama Action one being that they were doing the Guitar Hero challenge, where they have to match the different things, and if they end, and they have to do it correctly. If they misstep in one way or another with pressing the buttons, they get shocked, and if they get shocked 3 times, that's a loss. The Total Drama World Tour one is the slap dancing that comes from when Heather lost her tooth to the to Lashana finally giving her what's coming to her. And then the third one is the go-kart racing from Revenge of the Island. In this case, they actually have go-karts, though. I don't remember Revenge of the Island too well, though. I've only seen that season like twice. But regardless, yeah, it's a go-kart race. Which, when Duncan sees the go-kart race and sees the track and everything, he brings up to Heather, "Good thing Doris isn't here to see your boobies again, am I right?" This causes Courtney, who is also nearby, to slap him on the arm, rightfully so, and then Heather to slap him across the face. Look, it's Duncan. He's going to make rude remarks like that, and if we're going to do callbacks, we're going to do them right. Even if they are wrong in nature. So what ends up happening is, for the Guitar Hero Challenge, essentially, Courtney is going to be the one that does it for the villains, and the one who does it for the heroes is actually Mike. Except Svetlana comes up, because this is a dexterity thing, and while she is more about grace and everything, this is still something that might be up her alley, so she's excited to give it a shot. For the slap dancing, we have the 2 World Tour newbies here of Sierra and Al going off against it. And the villains win the Guitar Hero Challenge because Courtney is excited that she gets to go try hard and rewarded for it this time. And unfortunately, Svetlana is not used to this kind of thing and has very little practice, so she ends up having her hand cramp, which pulls out Chester, who proceeds to slam the electric guitar into the ground out of pure frustration, and he ends up falling backwards. It's comedic, but also sad. With the slap dancing, Sierra and Al are facing off against each other like before. They weren't facing off in the original World Tour, but they are facing off against each other. And Al just keeps whiffing Sierra. It gets to be a little bit funny when he's like actually on his feet now, much to everyone's surprise. Again, except Heather, who knew he was faking it for longer than he should have been. And Sierra is just actually juggling him. She's juggling him all around, and he keeps thinking he can take it at first, trying to do his whole Latin charm thing, and it just fails on Sierra. Sierra is not falling for it. And then she proceeds to slap him off the platform and win. Now for the go-kart race, that's where things get interesting. Brick versus Joe. A real big race there. Joe has been, like, very abrasive to the rest of her teammates so far. She's abrasive to Courtney, who just got very, like, Courtney was a little bit pushy about being the guitar player, but these 3 accepted it, like, almost no problem. Joe had issue with it because Courtney is a prissy little prom queen who doesn't need to be doing this kind of crap. Meanwhile, Scott doesn't participate. In fact, after Courtney's challenge, he congratulates her and they start chatting a lot. Meanwhile, Heather also isn't participating, but she's not, like, being abrasive or anything. She's just gloating about actually being right about Al, which the only one that annoys is Joe. Courtney brushes it off because she would do the same thing, and Scott could not care less. Meanwhile, when Al loses to Sierra, Joe practically mocks Al for losing to such an uneven twig or anything of the sort. Like she is roasting Al for losing. And then when she loses to Brick, it's a relatively close race for a while there until she ends up crashing. And both her and Brick's cars end up getting busted up pretty bad. So when they realize that the go-karts can't go anymore, it ends up becoming an actual race to the finish line. And Brick outpaces her just barely, winning the race for them. So not only has Joe lost a clutch win and their tiebreaker, but Joe has also been just not okay with anyone here, eventually telling Heather to shut up about being right. That it just becomes an actual 4-1 vote for Joe to get voted out. And with that, we now have something a little bit different. I forgot to do this earlier, but bear with me. This is the merge. Episode 7, yes. Cameron went to exile at the previous episode, by the way. But yeah, no, Joe was relentlessly digging at everyone. So as a result... The heck? Ah, that's what happened. Bloop. Fixing that. So as a result, yeah, the heroes and villains are still, like... It's very clearly uneven, but that's what's going on now. Now for episode 7, because Chris announced the merge. So both banners have been burned and everything. Chris also calls double elimination for this episode. Which is, you know, a thing. And now it's an egg collecting challenge that everyone's on. They grab color-coded cards out of a box to determine who their partner is. So what happens is Gwen ends up paired with Courtney. Scott and Duncan end up paired off. Sierra and Al are actually paired off with each other for egg collecting. Brick is paired off with Cameron. And then Mike, who's back up front now, is paired off with Heather. That leaves Zoe as the odd one out, and she is forced to drag around a mannequin. Chris finds this hilarious. Zoe only has to collect half as many eggs, though, because there's only one of her. Which is why it's an amount of eggs per player in this case. And throughout the episode, Heather is digging at Mike, just again and again and again, because this is Heather, she's mean. And as a result, this actually ends up triggering Mal to come back out, and he slams his eggs on her head. Meanwhile, Sierra and Al actually end up chatting with each other. And they both kind of talk how they never really chatted with each other on anything. And Sierra even says that Al is the one that she knows the least about out of all Total Drama contestants. Except for how her older brother, Jose, bullies him a lot by calling him Al. But that was revealed at the end of World Tour anyways, so it's not like it matters. She doesn't even mention the body shots code that the family has. Courtney and Gwen are mostly making up at this point, until Gwen says something mean about something less than savory about Scott, and this upsets Courtney all over again. This leads to them not being able to bury the hatchet. which is truly unfortunate. Brick and Cameron just get along famously, like they get along better than they thought they would. Brick admires Cameron's intellect and realizes that the brain is a muscle as well. Meanwhile, Cameron gets some mild exercise tips from Brick for his scrawnier body and build, which Cameron just soaks up and actually likes. Duncan and Scott, though, they're chatting and talking about their juvie things and how they like to cause mischief and mayhem. By all miracles, despite their bickering, Courtney and Gwen end up winning immunity this time. And what happens is Mal is still fronting by the time they get to the end of the challenge. And he points out to everyone the kinds of things Heather was saying. And we're not given the full context of all of what Heather said because some of it was very much off screen. But what ends up happening is even Al ends up offended by this and also votes her off. So everyone votes off Heather. And then afterwards, what happens is the other one that gets voted off is actually Sierra. Sierra gets voted off because she's way too clingy for Cameron, and he asked for everyone to vote her off, pretty much, if he could. Which Cameron's whole thing was please either vote me off or vote her off. I need to get away from her. And everyone voted off Sierra because she's the stronger competitor. And just happened to not win immunity. Episode 8 rolls around, and it's a new challenge. This one's a callback to Hook, Line, and Screamer. Except in this case, it's nowhere near as severe of a situation as before. And because both Gwen and Duncan are here, they're able to give the very important context to all of it. Because they were the ones that won this challenge the first time around. Courtney was long gone by then. Al wasn't a thing yet. And then these other four here just were not included. They may have seen it on TV, but no. Because what happens is Chris and Chef leave on a boat urgently, and there are reports of a woman wearing a janitor jumpsuit who has a bleached mask on and a steak knife who's on the loose. Gwen and Duncan point out that this is just like Hook, Line, and Screamer, and Mal is unfortunately still fronting, saying, "Nobody'll notice if someone goes missing, right?" Thinking it's all funny to do that. And, well, I mean, the ones that get picked off, in the order that they get picked off, first is Zoe, who's trying to stick around Mal, which does cause Mike to come out front a few times. But, like, also once Zoe gets picked off, like, while Mike's back is turned, he's kind of on his own and realizes that things are a little bit less easy than he thought, which puts Mal back up front, sadly. Al gets picked off as well, pretty fast, thinking he can just sweet talk his way out of it. And the killer stand-in just shakes her head and proceeds to just not let him get away. Like, he's kind of just stuck there, and he realizes the goal of the challenge and everything. The steak knife is then revealed to be plastic when Al is poked with it, and he's just like, oh, okay, I see. And right about when Al is kidnapped is when it's revealed that it's Blanley who's the one that's in the jumpsuit this time. She was asked to come back. Where is she? There she is. So Blanley is in this episode instead of doing it like Chef did. So now we have Blanley as a factor in here, which helps take away most of the suspense. Courtney and Scott are trying to do their thing, and Scott ends up thinking he's gonna, and then Scott ends up pushing Courtney into Blanley and running away, only to end up tripping and falling and then getting caught anyways by Blanley. Courtney is less than enthused by this, and towards the end of the episode will actually apologize to Gwen for not listening. Brick ends up kind of just feeling really bad and just getting jumped on by Blanley for this one. And once he learns that it's a plastic knife, he realizes, oh, okay. Now for Cameron. Cameron ends up having an issue. He starts running from Blanley. He's doing well. He's running away, and then he ends up in the area where they were doing the World Tour location challenge and trips on a trap and ends up getting really badly hurt. So he ends up getting pulled for that one, and he ends up getting captured, and they get him into a big cast and all that. Duncan and Gwen just look at each other, understanding what's going on, and Mal ends up getting kidnapped by Blanley as well, because she manages to sneak up on him, and he doesn't quite realize it until it's too late. He does put up a bit of a fight, and then he realizes the knife is plastic, and kind of calms down into being Mike after that full realization, with Mike being wigged out and then excited to see Zoe again once he's brought to the tent that they hide away in. But yeah, Cameron's out of the challenge, leaving just these two, just like before. Gwen is frustrated that this happened all over again and decides to go to the mess hall for a sandwich. Duncan ends up winning the challenge because it's Duncan and he would do that in this case. So Duncan would win the immunity, and then after that, Gwen is in the mess hall, and while she's making her sandwich, the escaped psycho killer with a chainsaw and a hook for a hand walks in, and they stare at each other. They lock eyes. It's a lot of prolonged eye contact. It's there for like a good 15 to 30 seconds. Just staring. Blankest of faces. Eyes wide as can be. And then the escaped killer starts running away the same way DJ did in season 1. Screaming, high-pitched, arms in the air. And he runs into the water and just runs away from the entire island. By the time everyone gets there, everyone realizes that Gwen has technically already chased him off because it's seen again, and well, would you look at that? Gwen is also given immunity purely because she left that much of an impression on the psycho killer. And when asked about why he was back on the island, Chris said, "We checked to make sure that there wasn't someone that we had dressed up like Blanley released. We didn't think he'd come back." To which Blanley just kind of bops him on the head for that one. Like, you should have checked. You should have made sure. So what happens is, because of the way this episode went, the one who gets eliminated this time is going to be Cameron. Cameron gets eliminated because of his injuries, and it becomes a required medical evacuation. Oop, wrong button. And then episode 9 is rolling around. This one's going to be... It's still going to be the same race as before. Damn it! Again with that bullshit. There we go. it's the same race as before. Duncan, and over the past few episodes, Duncan has been slowly going insane because he now recognizes Mike as Mal. He remembers Mal running juvie and everything. And so now he's trying to figure out a way to get himself off, because this is the episode where he truly fully realizes it. And he's like asking everyone to help him out. The only one that really talks to Courtney about it is Gwen, who mentions, "Hey, Duncan's not himself right now. He needs help." Courtney is being Courtney, rightfully bitter about him cheating. And she just does not care. Gwen starts trying to ask around as well. She asks to Brick, who kind of understands but also kind of doesn't. She talks to Scott because he's the only one that seems to like Duncan at this point, and Scott just does not give any less of a crap. He's just there like, "Why are you talking to me about this? We don't even like each other. Let alone you liking Duncan. Why do you care?" And Gwen just frustratedly walks off. She looks at Al and it's just like, "Nah, he can't help." So then she talks to Zoe, the nicest person here, and thinks that she might be able to help. And when they try to talk to Duncan about it, he's just dodging the questions. Just dodging all the questions. And the race goes mostly the same. Duncan looks at Chris's house and thinks, maybe I can blow that up. No, that's too extreme. I'll get sent to jail for sure that time. I just want to get out of here. Duncan has the... And then... So, like, Duncan has that clear-headed moment. And when it comes to elimination ceremony, Duncan literally is saying that whoever wins immunity, like, he will willingly take second place and give immunity to anyone else, and will help anyone else who tries to get to first that's willing to vote him out. And like, he manages to get close to the finish line, and then when he's just sitting there, someone passes. There's no telling who. It doesn't really matter. It's probably Courtney, though, who then proceeds to take first place. And when elimination comes around, Duncan is relieved that he's finally going to get voted out, only for it to be revealed that the votes were rigged against Brick, who got third place, essentially. He was close to Duncan. Like, Duncan saw Courtney pass through the finish line, and then he walked across himself, knowing that he was safe, and then Brick came not long after. And it's revealed that Mal has fronted again, and this time he rigged the votes against Duncan. So, that just kind of sucks for Brick and Duncan. Duncan is actually having the deepest look of fear in his eyes because Mal knows what he did. And he's just grinning at Duncan until Zoe talks, and then Mike comes back up front again. Episode 10. Episode 10 is the 100th episode thing. Ezekiel does kidnap Chris like in the original. And so Chris announces on the megaphone system that the challenge is to save Chris. Whoever gets it wins immunity today. Duncan, thinking, hey, I can actually get a different prize out of this and just get eliminated, tries to aggro the whole thing. Like, he tries to do it solo. Courtney, Gwen, and Scott end up teaming up purely because they're able to match with each other and make up for any absences. And what proceeds to next happen is Alejandro, Zoe, and Alejandro also goes alone but Zoe ends up sticking around Mike, who, because of the way things are, uh, they require a lot of precision and acrobatics. So Mike ends up switching to Svetlana. Svetlana has an extended time to chat with Zoe this time, which is not normal. But Zoe is not at all upset about it. She's actually liking having Svetlana around. And in this case, what's going on is Svetlana fills Zoe in on Mal and his whole existence. She calls it girl to girl talk in this case because she figured no time like the present since she's up front for an extended period of time. Eventually, Duncan ends up saving Chris from Ezekiel and just saying like, I don't care what everyone else does. Can you just give me the boot off this island? Crazy house evac. Chris is like confused by the whole thing. Like, why do you want out of here? And Duncan just says he is terrified of Mike and he wants out. He just wants to leave. Like, he doesn't even mention Mike, actually. He just says he wants out and he wants to leave. So Chris just agrees to it purely because Duncan ends up winning, and it definitely spices things up. Everyone escapes Boney Island, and what happens is Duncan is granted his evacuation that he wanted. He is gone. He leaves like he wanted. But Chris wants to unwind. So he craves the drama of the elimination ceremony. And as it stands, the one who ends up getting voted out is Al. Purely because he didn't help anyone, he didn't come in clutch or anything, he just ends up voted out. And there is no immunity statue to be found in this version. There are too few of players. There are too many players. So now we're on episode 11. Scott and Courtney have their big falling out. Like, it is finalized now, and they are not on good terms. Courtney wants him gone. He just wants like, they want each other gone, and it's getting on everyone else's nerves. And And so Mike and Mal are fighting for control in the headspace. Like, we see them wrestling with a short visual in the headspace with Vito, Chester, and Manitoba just actually like it's like the Simpsons monkey fight thing where these three are all excitedly watching it happen. These two are just wrestling for control of the mind, and Svetlana is the one out fronting because she's the one that's best equipped for any of these social situations. And so it become and so like Zoe and Svetlana still end up chatting and being friendly. And and the challenge goes mostly the same, but in this case Courtney wins immunity. Eventually Scott says something that gets beeped out, which makes everyone else just look at him like, you just said that? Like, we don't know what it is, but if it got beeped out, it's obviously bad. So as a result, Scott is eliminated because all four just agreed. Now we're on to episode 12, which is the food prep episode. Courtney is not on a malicious bend this time for the food. And so and this time Chris is not torturing his interns. He's just not. But they have to make a good meal, and unfortunately Gwen's food ends up getting cooked wrong, and she ends up mixing some bad ingredients together. It's just a more regularized cooking episode. And the other half of this episode is about Mal trying to take over Mike's life again. which causes issues to pop up until Zoe speaks up, because we're seeing a rapid swap between Mike, Mal, Mike, Mal, Mike, Mal. Just they keep switching with each other, and eventually Zoe grabs Mal by the shoulders and just says it to his face, like he doesn't need to go this over the top on it. Mal pushes her away and just slinks back into the headspace, letting Mike come back out. And so, sorry, I had to check something real quick. And so what happens is Mal is miffed, but he's not exactly able to fight back. And Gwen ends up getting eliminated automatically, purely because her food ends up the worst. Episode 13 is episode 13 is just like it was in canon, essentially. Courtney wins the competition because she is in the zone, and then Mike ends up talking with Zoe, like, solidly. Zoe is trying to get through to Mike and talk to him about what Mal's whole deal is. And she mostly does get through to him, saying, "You don't need Mal anymore. You're away from what was happening before, and you can be your own person." And this eventually leaves everyone in the headspace to feel relatively at peace. Mal has that moment of understanding where he sees what she says and he realizes, I'm actually away from all of that. I don't need to do this anymore. And he just relaxes. There's no big reset button. It's just Mal realizes his behaviors have gone too far and he can just stop now. He doesn't need to cause any more fighting. He doesn't need to cause any other issues. He can just let Mike free and let Mike go around and do his thing. Mal is finally at peace for the moment. And he understands, and he apologizes to Mike and Zoe before he goes back into the headspace. Courtney ends up winning the challenge, only for Zoe to only for her to have the sole choice on who to eliminate, and she eliminates Zoe. And the reason Courtney eliminates Zoe, she says, Mike is clearly the weaker opponent, and it's because of his, she says MPD, but I'm still, she mentions his multiple personalities are what makes him the weaker opponent, making him clearly unable to compete correctly, which Mike is angry about this. And just up and says, well, at least if I were to sue this show for wrongful elimination, I wouldn't be a spoiled brat that demanded special dinners or treatments as compensation. Courtney digs at Mike again, prompting Mal to come out. And Mal just says, and at least me being the bad guy is to stop this moron from being in danger. You've long since passed the need to do any of that, you sorry excuse of a CIT. Zoe and Mal, of all people, hug, and Mal is clearly starting on his path to no longer being the malevolent one, or the maladaptive one in this case. And Courtney is more determined than ever to be the one that wins the prize money, because this is her first time in a finale, and she's in it to win it. and she is damn determined. The insight we get at the end of this episode is into Mike's headspace when whoever's in front of Mike ends up falling asleep and all the other headmates are roasting marshmallows and talking about how they're excited for the big day. So they start talking strategy. These five start talking strategy and invite Mal to the circle. So now it's all six of them chatting, trying to figure out how they're going to win the challenge. They're already making plans on how to cooperate and everything. Courtney is damn determined. They don't get the special assistance like before, and they end up actually competing for King of the Mountain type of deal. The other contestants all do come back, and they all get to sit on different sides, like in the season 1 finale. So they get to just support whoever they want they get to provide that moral support as they so choose. One moment. Trying to fix that. Come on. And with the moral support that they're all providing, this makes things very interesting. Oop, where'd she land? There she landed. There. Sorry, this is taking a bit. The first thing they have to do to get to the King of the Mountain thing, because in this case it's just a series of doors that they kind of have to answer now, is they have to correctly answer which order everyone else got eliminated in. Which, as a result, they kind of do pull that off. They do pull off the order of who gets eliminated when. The closest one, at the very least, gets their door open first with a short delay, and the one who gets it correct is actually Mike, because he paid attention somewhat. Courtney gets several wrong. She proceeds to think that Cameron was voted out before Joe for some reason. She thinks Heather was voted out after Al, and Lindsay was the first one out instead of Owen. The only mistakes that Mike makes during any point, by sheer miracle, is he ends up getting Joe and Anne Maria backwards. But that's small potatoes. It ends up becoming there is still the end of the mountain finale when they actually end up having to face off against each other, and they have to do the balance beam fighting that was at the end of World Tour for it. Which what happens is Mike's shirt gets torn off. So Vito ends up back up front one more time. He's not too fond of fighting a dame, because it's Vito and he's a bit like that. So in Courtney's ending, she just takes it and just rolls with it, knocking him off and winning the million. Now in Mike's ending, Courtney ends up saying a very harsh line of course I knew you would be too weak to win this. You're always the weakest one. Which doesn't prompt Mal, but she ends up pushing Vito and hitting him a little bit in a sour spot, prompting Chester to come out. And Chester is like, I don't care who you are, never try to do that again. Like Chester calls her out for it, and he ends up charging her on the balance beam, pushing her off forward, sending her back into the water. leading to Mike being declared the winner. Mike snaps back up front, confused about how he just won, but he is excited about it. And yeah, either way, like Zoe and Mike end up happy together, all that fun stuff. Courtney, in her ending, she's excited. She she even points to the camera saying, "I told you I would win," which excites her. Just the absolute biggest callback to the end of the first two-parter in season 1. Meanwhile, in Mike's ending, he's excited because he and Zoe get to go out and do like their own thing and have fun. So now he and Zoe get to go on like a luxury vacation or something of the sort. And when it's realized that the island is shaking, Cameron asks Chef, like, what did you do to do that? How did you make this? And Chef mentions it was a fracking machine, causing the island to sink. The money does not go away, just the island. And everyone just gets to mostly calmly swim to shore. Not even like anything scary, it's just a relatively calm ending either way. And that's hopefully a better version of Total Drama All Stars. Sorry things were delivered a little weird and everything. I've never done one of these before, and I have spent multiple days trying to take this and actually do it. I actually obviously had to adjust my script a few times to make sure I didn't screw things up, because I kept forgetting, oh, right, I already eliminated Sierra. Oh, right, I already eliminated Cameron during this episode, so he can't be here, nor can Sierra. I was sleep deprived when I came up with this idea, and now this is the most awake I can be when making it. I hope this went well for everyone. I hope you liked it. Uh, don't expect this to be regular content from me if this is how you're finding my channel. But I am going to be doing other nerd stuff, and hopefully this will go over well, and other people can enjoy things. Regardless, stay safe, everyone. Uh, you know, don't be a Chris.